Hello, DMV. It's freaking crazy town here. All sorts of shit going on. From all the stuff that's going on within the government. You know, you've got the federal layoffs that are still, affecting our area specifically. We've also got all sorts of stuff going on with tariffs that everybody's hearing about. So a lot of stuff going on in everyone's world, but especially those of us who live close into the DMV. But now there's actually something kind of crazy. I think it's actually kind of similar to the tariffs, where we've got actually a Zillow and Redfin tariff about to hit the marketplace starting in May. And so we're going to kind of break this down. First of all, before you guys get all tuned in and settled down, I want to make sure that everybody's taking care of their taxes one way or another. Either they filed them today or you filed an extension. If you forgot about it, then you know what? You can drop this right now and go on and do that. I don't want to get you in any trouble by watching this. So, like I say, you know, we've got really what's going on right now within the real estate space is a portal war. It's a war with some of the biggest names in the real estate business in it. And tonight, I've got a very special guest. I've got a colleague of mine, Craig Sword at Compass. And Craig and I have worked together for a few years. And one of the reasons that I wanted to bring Craig on tonight is not only is he, you know, obviously he's a Compass agent. And once again, I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint that Compass is also one of the big names involved with this portal war. But Craig also has a unique perspective also, you know, because he does a lot of work through Zillow. So with all that being said, I want to introduce you guys to Craig Sword. Craig, come on in.
Hey, Kevin, how's it going?
Good, man. How you doing?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So did I oversell it? Did I overhype it? I mean, I know we're in the real estate business here, so it's obviously kind of hits us harder than most people. But would you say that it's kind of a portal war and a war of some of the biggest names in the real estate business right now?
Yeah, I think real estate tariff is the exact phrase that I would use. It's you have some of the biggest names from public sites like Zillow and brokerages like Redfin, Compass, all in the mix for what we're going to do next, and a lot of things that are changing for both buyers and sellers. So huge news.
Right. Well, also, I just wanted to let everybody know too, guys, definitely put your questions in. We have a little bit of an outline and things that we want to kind of hit and cover tonight, but at the same time, also, this is really about, collaboration. This is about just kind of throwing things out there, and we'd love to hear from you guys, any questions that you have or any comments. So feel free to go ahead and type that in. But I think first of all, once again, the big news hit, if I'm remembering correctly, it's like a freaking whirlwind, but I think it was Thursday of last week. Maybe it was Friday. I don't know. The days all line up here. But here's the article that we've got here. It says Zillow to prohibit listings that are privately marketed starting in May. And so what they're kind of saying here right now is that, starting in May, they may not have every property on the market. There's going to be probably inventory that's on the market for sale that you're not going to find on Zillow. And now, yesterday, Redfin kind of followed suit as well. So I think we can just kind of combine them in there as well. So, what are your thoughts on that, Craig? What are you hearing?
Yeah. And I mean, to throw in another big brokerage, EXP has kind of joined on that side of things as well. So, and I've been looking at, this was one of the initial articles that kind of rolled out, and there's been a lot of things that have come out since, getting a little bit more into the weeds. But, in reality, there's a huge chunk of the market that does what's called kind of a delayed marketing technique, right? And you're kind of testing the market. You're not putting it on big sites like Zillow and homes.com and Redfin and things of that nature until the seller decides that that's their best option, right? And Zillow has basically kind of come out and said, hey, if you're not putting it through the MLS and you're not sharing it with all of the potential buyer prospects out there, when it's time to go down that side of things for the seller, we're not going to publish it on our site, right? Swiftly after, Redfin said, hey, we're going to do the same thing. EXP then came out and said, hey, we're going to kind of adopt this policy as well. But yeah, it looks like it's going into effect in May. So a couple weeks until we see it shake out.
Right, right. And as I kind of alluded to in the buildup here, you do have a unique perspective because obviously you're a colleague of mine at Compass. We have strongly promoted, as long as I've been there, and I've been there since 2019, really promoted the idea of private listings. As you mentioned, for a homeowner to be able to test the market, maybe at somewhat of an aspirational price, or maybe test the market and be proactive while they're getting their home ready for the market. Maybe it's not quite ready for the, show ready or camera ready. However, let's give it a shot while we're preparing it to see if maybe there are some takers out there. And so Compass has been a big proponent of that. But you have a unique perspective because you have worked a lot from I'm probably saying this wrong, but the Zillow side of things. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, with this news, Zillow has kind of taken the stance of, hey, if any buyer can see a listing on any side of things, whether it's private or public or whatever it is, every buyer should be able to see that. And, for those people that don't understand every nuance of our industry, some people, when they go on to search on Zillow or consumer IDX sites like that, they can't see all of the market until they work with like a good realtor like Kevin, and he can show them all of the market. But for myself and the team that I work for, we've worked with Zillow directly and done marketing campaigns with them and basically generating prospective buyers who are interested in particular homes in the market. So part of this, Zillow is taking all of this data, right? And they're kind of sharing it on their site, which, to their credit, is the biggest home searching site in the world, right? And then when a person who's just kind of casually looking at homes goes on their site and they see 123 Main Street and they say, this home's perfect, they can click a button that says, hey, I can request a tour or ask for further information on this. When they click that button, it doesn't go to the listing agent who's representing that transaction or that home. It doesn't go to the seller. It goes to what they call a premier agent, which is essentially a buyer's agent who has invested marketing money in that particular zip code or area. And then Zillow is kind of siphoning off that buyer prospect to that agent. A lot of people, I think, when they go on to search through Zillow, they may think that they're contacting the listing agent. They may think that they're contacting a customer service representative at Zillow. But, part of this is, they want everything to be displayed on their site. They want to have access to all of the inventory. But a big layer of this is, hey, if a lot of the inventory isn't being shown on our site, we aren't able to generate as much revenue through kind of these buyer leads that we're giving out.
Right. And, obviously, these huge portals like Zillow, like Redfin, and of course, we'll throw Compass in there in the mix, homes.com. I mean, nobody wants to say, hey, I've got 80% of the marketplace here. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. I mean, people expect to see 100% of the marketplace there, but it's starting to sound like that could be changing. Actually, it will be changing, as of what we're hearing is May. Let's talk about a little bit about like how we got here, because, as you said, to those on the outside, this can be quite confusing. And heck, we're on the inside. I'm confused as hell about a lot of this stuff. I'm trying to do the very best I can to take care of my clients, whether that be buyer clients, seller clients, of course, earn a living, work through this crazy freaking world, maybe someday be able to retire. I don't know. But so it's just like there's enough going on in this world that most people like really don't understand a lot of what's going on. So I'm going to kind of take us back a little bit in time and kind of like, how did we get here? And there's something, this is kind of snooze fest here, but guys, please hang in with me because it'll make hopefully it'll kind of explain things. But in 2019, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, adopted a policy called the Clear Cooperation Policy. And this policy actually didn't take effect until 2020. And the idea behind it was, as Craig had mentioned, is to, the idea behind it was to really give greater transparency, to have all properties, all agents and buyers have a fair opportunity to see all the properties that were for sale. And the reason this came about was because at that point in time, there were companies out there, and Compass was really, I have to say, they were the catalyst. I was there. I came in when this all happened. And we really, let's be call it what it is. At Compass, we've kind of really developed our own MLS that runs parallel to the actual MLS. And so a lot of our properties have been marketed off market. We've had great success in selling some of our homes off market that never make it to Zillow and Redfin, never make it to the MLS. And guess what? The National Association of Realtors did not like that. The MLS, the local MLS boards did not like that. And so they put this clear cooperation policy in there to kind of put a kibosh on private listings. It kind of worked for quite some time, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole goal behind it and kind of the infancy of it. And just for everybody, because there's these big names being thrown out, Zillow, Redfin, Compass, so on and so forth. But, if you're in our industry, almost every brokerage, if not every brokerage, has private listings in some capacity. They have different names for them, but basically, certain sellers, for all sorts of different reasons, want to test their home on the market, right, before actually rolling it out to the MLSs. And once they go to the MLSs, that information is then shared with the Zillows, the Redfins, homes.com, other platforms, right? So for a multitude of reasons, sellers choose to kind of pre-market their home, or what NAR and everyone is calling delayed marketing, before you get to the MLSs. So this has always been there. It's been something that Compass has been able to execute and have a lot of success with. From a seller standpoint, right, I think it's an amazing tool, right? You can test your property out before you go to the live market. You might even test it out at a more aspirational price. If you think your home is worth $800,000 to $850,000, maybe you pre-market it at $900,000. And if you get a great offer, fantastic. I think the question that kind of Zillow raises, and maybe there's some truth to it, and I think that it'll shake out over the next 30 days or so, is it fair for prospective buyers not to be able to go on sites like Zillow and to be able to see all of the market, right? And I think that's the big question behind everything. But in reality, this is something that's just been taking place, always took place, and is just coming to the forefront now.
Right. I mean, the obviously there's been a battle on both sides. Zillow, obviously, and Redfin have been pro clear cooperation policy. Compass is our CEO, Robert Reffkin, has been probably one of the biggest opponents to the clear cooperation policy. And of course, his view on it is, for Compass, is it gives home sellers the right to market their properties as they wish, as they desire, and not be forced to immediately put the property into multiple listing service, where days on market start to pile up. Obviously there's damage that can be done there by, putting the property on the market possibly too soon, being forced to, and really having no choice. So, the Compass side of it, or the Refkin side of it, really has been very much an opponent of the clear cooperation policy. Now, also, once again, we're going to get in and out of this topic really quick. But, last year, most of you guys are aware that they had the whole NAR lawsuit settled, class action settlement. And I think this was also, this settlement occurred March of last year, and new rules went into effect that have changed the way buyers and sellers now have now work with their agent. And I think that part of the, this settlement also, Craig, is part of what gave more leverage to Refkin, to other opponents of clear cooperation, in order to try to ultimately get rid of it. I mean, wouldn't you say that that's part of it as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that was the catalyst for the MLS really losing a lot of its power and weight in the industry, right? And a company that is very tech savvy, like a Redfin, like a Compass, they can kind of develop their own IDX and MLS and kind of show properties on their site. What's really interesting about this news is that the National Association of Realtors, who really kind of lays out guidelines for how the industry should work, kind of came to a decision weeks ago saying, hey, listen, we're okay with delayed marketing, right? We're okay with the seller having the right to choose how to market their home, how to list their home, when to do that. It's their home. They own the property. They can choose how to market it, right? And instead of NAR coming and making a decision saying, hey, you can or can't do this, Zillow comes out, which is a privately owned company. And they're coming at this again from a sense of consumer advocacy. They're saying, hey, if you're a prospective buyer who's looking at homes, you should be able to see 100% of the market, right? The question that I think about is, okay, well, is that necessarily fair to sellers? If, does a seller want to go to Zillow? Do they want to market their home in a different fashion? Do they want a million people to see it? They didn't sign up to have Zillow, take the photos that they took of their home. They didn't sign up to have a prospective buyer's agent reach out about their property that they don't know. They'd probably rather have that person call their listing agent, honestly. So I think the biggest thing behind this news is that it's not NAR, it's not the MLS, it's Zillow who's basically put this line in the sand saying, we're not going to publish it if you choose to go this delayed marketing route.
Yeah. And you know what, you brought up a great point, and a point that I hadn't even thought of, which is, when you talk about the homeowner side of it, is you're right. I mean, I think there's a lot of confusion, and I'm sure better than I do. From the people that are find the property on Zillow, that they think they're contacting the listing agent, who knows about the property, or some type of representative with Zillow who is intimately familiar with the property. So I'm sure there's a lot of confusion at, okay, who is this, and how did I get, how do you have anything to do with this property? And sure. I think that home sellers, I agree with you. I mean, they didn't necessarily sign up for that. They signed up most likely thinking that their agent that they hired, who is the face of their property, who knows it better, or at least should know it better than any other agent out there, is the one who's fielding those inquiries, those calls, and messages that come into them. So that's a really good point that I didn't think of. We've got a question here, Craig, and it comes from Kelsey. And she says, I'm confused how this change is profitable or advantageous for sites like Zillow.
So the interesting part is I don't necessarily think it is. And I think that, Zillow in kind of drawing this line in the sand, right, and saying, hey, we're not going to publish listings if they've gone this delayed marketing route and then they choose to go on the MLS. What they're really kind of saying is, hey, we Zillow, the biggest home search, portal in the world, we don't have access to all the inventory, and we might feel like we're losing more and more of it every day. An interesting thing that I've been looking at and what I think about is, okay, Zillow is this big monster tech site where people search for homes, right? But how many of those actually, turn into transactions? They kind of boast that there's 200 million users that visit their site every year. Well, there's only 4 million transactions. So I think a lot of people use it just to look, to pass time and look at $20 million houses in Los Angeles. I don't know how much of it is actually coming to fruition to actual buying and selling homes. But to answer the question more directly, I don't think that this is more profitable for Zillow. I think that is less profitable.
Yeah. And for those of you who are watching out there, once again, feel free to ask any questions. And also feel free to fess up if you're one of those ones who's checking out $25 million properties in Los Angeles on Zillow. Let us know about that. We want your feedback on that, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that there's obviously, there's this, to me, seems like it's a high stakes game of chicken, more or less, between Compass and some other companies, maybe not quite as large as Compass, and Zillow and now Redfin. But I've got an article that I pulled up here. It's about, it kind of shows the amount of off-market inventory that Compass has, and it's growing. I think, let's see if I can find that here. Let's see.
Yeah, and while you're pulling that up, Kevin, I mean, just to kind of go back to the last question, I mean, from Zillow's standpoint, it kind of makes sense that they drew this line in the sand, because if you have these other kind of tech giants like Compass coming in and being able to kind of build their own MLS and show maybe more inventory that you have, that's a big competitor, and they're the 800-pound gorilla in the real estate world. So if people are kind of inching at them, it makes sense that they chose to go this route.
Yeah, I saw something, also had another article that was Compass had, I think in February of 2025, I mean, so just 2 months ago, that the amount of inventory with I guess that 35% of all Compass inventory was going through this private exclusive, this private marketing before it actually went into MLS. Or actually, I may have that wrong. Maybe it was 35% of all Compass inventory was currently in that private marketing and everything. So, I mean, it's a high percentage, and it's been growing a lot recently. And of course, as we know, with being at Compass, and once again, guys, we want to try to keep this. Feel free if you have another view, if you're another agent watching this and you have another view, feel free to throw it out there, because we're trying to keep this fair here. I certainly, fair and balanced, trying to keep it fair here and trying to say both pros and cons. Obviously, we are with Compass, but trying to keep this fair and balanced here. But yeah, I mean, the private exclusive is something that, we've been strongly encouraged to increase. Once again, I've had a lot of great success with it. Oh yeah, this is the article I was looking for. Let me see if we can go ahead and get a little closer in there. Yeah. So basically what this is showing here is that July of 2024, there were 2,400 basically listings that were being marketed privately through Compass. And that's nationally, roughly a little over 2,400. But the growth has been 150% since July of 2024. Between July 2024 and February, it's grown 150%, and now there's like 6,300. So, there's definitely a lot more properties that Compass, as well as some of these other brokerages, are now listing exclusively with their own companies. And there's some of them may be listed, privately the whole time. Others, maybe it's a little bit of a strategy, like Craig and I were saying, where, okay, we're going to try it for this period of time, maybe test it at an aspirational price. Maybe we can sell it without the seller having to go through all the headaches and heartaches and let's just call it bull crap that most sellers have to go through, with signs in their yard and lock boxes and open houses and shoe covers and booties and all this kind of stuff, for all these, people that are coming through. That's a pain in the neck to have your house on the market. So, I think there's a lot of people, at least a lot of my clients, love the idea of possibly, trying it for a few weeks, a month at that higher price, without it being out there, all their neighbors knowing, without all the hoopla and just some of the headaches that go along with selling a property.
Yeah. And I mean, it's an interesting stat. And the one thing to kind of note here, and just so, it's not Kevin and I just talking about how great Compass is, but, every other brokerage has their private exclusive listing network too. And I'm assuming that those have been kind of growing over the last few years or so. And, the thing that I keep coming back to with this news is that, we're still a little bit in a seller's market. I think it's starting to even out a little bit. But really, it's hard for me to imagine Zillow, a home search website, telling a property owner how they can market and list their home. And again, if this were to come from the National Association of Realtors, if it came from the Department of Justice, and they said, this is how you have to do it. But it's interesting that Zillow is the company that's doing this. And again, it for me, it usually comes back to revenue and money. And I think that if these stats, if we went across to other brokerages and this, kind of private inventory is growing and growing and growing, Zillow realizes that they're a smart company. Their CEO's super sharp, and they realize that they're losing out on potential revenue. And these competitors who were once smaller are now, gaining a little bit of speed. So super, super interesting.
Yeah, I was actually out of town last weekend visiting one of my daughters in Southampton in New York, and there was this awesome house for sale in her neighborhood, and we were looking it up all over the place, couldn't find it anywhere. But then we finally found it on the Corcoran website, so Barbara Corcoran's company. So they were marketing it privately. Once again, do not know how long they plan on doing that or whatever, but maybe that's the goal the whole way through. And yeah, there's definitely things changing within the industry there. Now we've talked about, some of the Compass side, obviously the idea is for home sellers, to have the option to be able to market their property as they see fit with greater freedom with them and their agent on how they want to market the property. But, talk about some of the pros, for buyers. Okay, maybe now Zillow is not going to be, promoting every listing that's out there right now. They're openly saying that right now. And so is Redfin. So, would Compass be a good alternative? Now, once again, I'm trying not to be too compassy. I'm really not.
Yeah.
But what are some of the pluses for buyers who work with the Compass agent?
Well, and not just Compass really for me, but I think one really good thing that came out of like the settlements with NAR and the whole industry and kind of the now world that we live in where commission is completely negotiable between a buyer's agent, between a listing agent, between their clients, right? And I think that over time, I hope, and I think that people will start reaching out to an agent in the beginning of their home search, probably shopping around for a buyer's agent. I mean, it's very common in our world for a property owner who owns 123 Main Street to interview Kevin, to interview Craig, to interview all sorts of different agents to see who they like best, who they think is going to do the best job. And I think if the industry goes towards, reaching out to a real estate professional to kind of like begin your journey, I think you're in a much better case scenario, because if you work with a really good agent, whether it's with Compass or any other brokerage, they're going to be able to give you access to inventory that you would have never been able to see if you're just casually shopping on Zillow. And again, not to kind of down Zillow, not to down Redfin, not to down these big sites. I think that they have a lot of value, and I think their user experience is great. But, if you're buying a $500,000 home or $1 million home, and it's the biggest transaction of your life, Zillow might not be the best fit for you, right? You might want to reach out to someone who really does it and knows the area that you're looking and can show you some different things than just an online portal.
Right. And I said many times, I think that there can be a lot of value in a lot of these, third party sites like Zillow, realtor.com, homes.com. There can be a lot of value, but what I also find is they tend to be very good. Like, it's a good gateway, to ultimately finding hopefully a good real estate agent. Because here's the thing. I mean, I think that I see a lot of people out there, especially the younger guys out there. They love, checking out the Redfin and Zillow and like, I'm going around the real estate agent. I don't need to, I'm doing this all on my own. Nobody knows what I'm doing here. I could check all this stuff out on my own. But I kind of say it's a little bit like going out and you're hunting for a grizzly bear. And I don't want any animal activists give me a hard time about this one, but if you're going out hunting for a freaking grizzly bear, you better be prepared. You better have your freaking gun, your ammunition, everything in place, because guess what? If you're hunting for something, you're going to find it, and you need to be ready. You need to be prepared, because if you're not, then that freaking grizzly bear is going to go to town on you, and here you've just gone out and poked the bear, I guess, and pissed him off and ended up getting eaten.
100%. 100%. And I think that not to cut you off. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, no. But I was just gonna say it's the exact same way when it comes to this. It's great finding properties, but then you find one. What do you do next? I mean, as a homeowner, I mean, ultimately, at a bare minimum, you're going to need an agent. Most likely, I mean, unless you go by an open house, most likely you're at a bare minimum, you're going to need to have an agent open up the freaking door. Right. But obviously, if you're working with an agent, hopefully they are a lot more than just an Uber driver and door opener. Craig, you were going to say.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. And look, I have a perspective of my team and myself individually, I've done marketing with Zillow and worked tons of prospective buyers who have started their journey through Zillow, just casually looking. And for the most part, a lot of people are first-time home buyers that are doing that and haven't kind of gone through that process yet. And there's a lot of education behind it. Some people will move from out of state or out of the country and they don't have an agent and they want to start their process there. And I think that there's a world where Zillow is like a great tool for people. But, Kevin, what you just alluded to there, we've been in a very competitive market for many years now. And, I can tell you, as a buyer, as a seller, the big takeaway for anybody who's listening, who's not a real estate agent and just a person who might be looking to buy or sell a home, go talk and interview as many agents as you can find and find the one who you think is going to do a great job for you. Look them up online, see how much business they do. In our world, 10% of the agents that you run into really do a lot of business, and a lot of agents don't do much at all. And if you're making the biggest transaction in your life financially, you probably want to go with someone who it's not their, second job or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and once again, a good agent out there will know of properties that you can find off market that you won't find on any other platform. I mean, I'm sure you do a ton of off market sales, Craig.
Sure.
Am I right about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think any agent who's doing a pretty high level of production, whether it's in our market or anywhere in the country, is doing homes that are, using delayed marketing or just not on the MLS. So I think, that's why this news is, it's so interesting to me that Zillow is the one who's drawing this line in the sand. And another interesting takeaway, because, this news keeps developing, but Homes.com, who has been, kind of this silent competitor with Zillow and these other portals and been spending a lot of money on marketing themselves, has always had the branding of, for agents, you're listing your lead, right? So they're not in the business of selling prospective buyers information to buyers agents. And their CEO came out and said, we are not going along with what Zillow and Redfin are doing. And if you choose as a seller to use delayed marketing before you go to the MLS, we'll absolutely publish it. So it's interesting, because if we're talking about these portal wars, I'm sure that Homes.com was very excited to see that Zillow took this stance, because it kind of gives them the leverage to say, hey, we're agent friendly, we're consumer friendly. You can market and sell your home any way you'd like.
Right. And Craig, why don't you explain just for a moment also, the difference between, the Zillow model and the Homes.com model, because, once again, Homes.com, if I understand correctly, I mean, if I've got a property on the market, the leads that come in go directly to me. They're not sold out to other people who have invested in that zip code. Is that correct? Versus Zillow, where it could, ultimately that lead's going to go to somebody who's invested in that zip code.
100%. Yeah. And I think so it's basically, look, if Kevin has a listing, 123 Main Street, and that home is reflecting to sites like Zillow, Homes.com, Redfin, so on and so forth. Redfin and Zillow, if someone is going to their website and sees that home and is interested in that home and makes an effort to reach out through their site, that's going to a buyer's agent who has basically paid them money for that information, for that data, for that buyer. Whereas Homes.com, if Kevin is listing a property and someone reaches out about the property, they're going to get Kevin. Which, a lot of sellers, I think they think that's how Zillow works. I think that's how a lot of people just think this works, because Kevin's listing the home. He probably knows a lot more about the home than some random person, that you're getting through Zillow or Redfin or someone else.
Absolutely. So we got a few questions, but we also have a confession here. Kelsey has a confession. She says, I'm certainly guilty of looking up multi-million-dollar homes in San Diego from the comfort of my one-bedroom apartment. Hey, you know what? Gotta love the transparency.
We share that guilt.
Chris Balto has a question. He says, do you think Zillow cares about consumers or just control? Ooh.
I don't think that they don't care about consumers. I think that they are, carving out this decision and explaining this decision publicly as though that is the only thing that this is about. In reality, I think that it's much more about revenue or potential lost revenue. And, to the question's point, probably control. I mean, Zillow has really been the biggest online website and IDX feed for listings in the country. And I think that, that's starting to change a little bit, especially when they're coming out to the public and saying, hey, we don't have all the inventory. You can go somewhere else and see 100 homes, but on our website, you can only see 70.
Right, exactly. So Chris asks another question. What steps should consumers take if they suspect a fraudulent listing on a real estate platform?
Fraudulent listing on a real estate platform. So if it was on Zillow or Redfin or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've heard of situations back in the day, with the Craigslist. No relation, right?
No relation. I wish
no
I wouldn't be on this. I wouldn't be on this house.
I remember stuff like that, and I think there's it's funny because I had a client, not funny at all, but I've heard of stories, especially with people that have own lots where you've had people that have contacted real estate agents say they want their lot listed for sale, and it's not their lot. They never meet with them. I actually had that happen to one of my clients, and they interesting. They were just so.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't see a lot with fraudulent stuff out there.
I feel like it's fewer and further between. I'm sure it happens. I mean, if you see something like that, reach out to whatever portal you're on and alert them, or reach out to a real estate agent like Kevin, and I'm sure he'd love to do some detective work for you.
Yeah. Well, any more thoughts that you have on the Zillow, Redfin, Compass, any of this stuff going on? I mean, obviously this is all kind of new news. I mean, but I'm just going to call it what it is. I mean, Zillow more or less has gone on the record, as has Redfin, to say that they're not going to have all of the properties on the market starting in May. And that would include those properties that have been marketed publicly off of the MLS, which is exactly what now National Association of Realtors said they're allowing us to do. So, it's not like they're following National Association of Realtors. They're kind of on an island going out there saying that they will not, place these properties on their website. So, I mean, I'm sure more to be heard on this.
Yeah, and I just think that it's like, I almost kind of get it from Zillow's perspective. And going back to the second to last question of like feeling like they're losing control, and they've been kind of the big dog on the block as far as, having control of the market for people who are searching for homes. And I think they're probably losing a little bit of control. And when they draw this line in the sand, I think what they hope and think happens is everyone in the industry, sellers, agents, brokers, all say, you know what, we're not going to do delayed marketing anymore. It's all going to go on the MLS. Zillow now has all the inventory back. Everything is good. If it doesn't go that way and it stays on track the way that it is, or, I think it's a little bit of the beginning of the start of the end for Zillow, because at a certain point, once there's another site, homes.com or any site that says, hey, if you go to Zillow, you're going to see 50% of the market. I'm going to show you everything. At a certain point, the consumers will shift over to where they can see more homes and more options that are available for them to move.
Well, and of course, as well as I do with Compass, I mean, that's one of our big unique selling propositions to home buyers is that, you come to our portal, not only can you see everything that you're going to find on Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, Homes.com, but you're also going to see the hidden inventory, those properties that that may never come up for sale, on the market through MLS, or those properties that, might be delayed, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month even, so that's one of our big selling propositions is, not only come here and find everything you can find on those platforms, but you could probably find 15 to 20% more that you'll never find there. So that's a huge, and obviously, you can't understate that. I mean, that is the Compass side of things is, everybody's trying, it's who has the better business model, who has, the most amount of inventory. I mean, that to me is what this is all about, and like I say, any predictions on who you think's going to be, I mean, there's going to be so much craziness that goes on, obviously there's twists and turns every day, but you kind of alluded to it. Do you see over time that this may kind of end Zillow, potentially end Redfin, maybe end Compass? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about ending Zillow, Redfin. To be honest with you, I think that sellers are still going to choose in a lot of case scenarios to market their property privately before going to the MLS, right? I don't think a lot of that is going to change because it's such a beneficial path for them to go on for so many different reasons. And, at the end of the day, if Zillow chooses not to publish their listing, if they go to the MLS after not selling privately, it's going to go to other sites like homes.com and other compass.com and so on and so forth. And, buyers agents who are working with that prospective buyer are going to be able to show them the home. The only one who's really losing out in that case scenario is Zillow.
Yeah. Agreed. So we've got another question. Ashley asks, is Zillow's position that listings that have been marketed privately at any point won't ever go on Zillow, or will they add them later if they go public? It seems punitive to never list them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Zillow stance, if you're kind of reading their new policy, is if you have a private listing and are marketing it publicly in any way, and they've actually defined this. So
and that's confusing right there because you hear private and public. I even trip up on those words quite a bit. But go on.
I think in reality, what Zillow is attempting to do is to say, hey, the National Association of Realtors said you can do and use this delayed marketing status before you go to the MLS. Zillow is kind of making a claim saying, hey, if you go that route, right, and you publicly market this private exclusive listing in any way, we're not going to publish it on our site. So again, I think to that question right there, who loses out? Zillow loses out by not publishing that site and maybe getting revenue from that. Now, the other side of this is, does the seller lose out from that? Okay. So if they go and say, you know what, I want to market my property privately for 2 weeks while I'm getting it ready. And we're going to put it at this, a little bit aspirational price. And if we don't sell there, then I'm going to go to the MLS. Okay. At that point, if they don't sell over those 2 weeks and they say, hey, we're going to put it on the MLS and it's going to get syndicated everywhere, and Zillow says, we're not going to publish this on our site, is the seller damaged? If so, how much are they damaged? I think that's a question that we have no idea yet. But that is definitely something that's real.
And you and I spoke and talked in the office on Monday. I mean, it's just one more conversation that we are going to need to have with our clients, giving them good options and choices as well as counsel, pros and cons, and let them make the best decisions for themselves. But, I kind of want to drill down a little bit on Ashley's question a little bit. Once again, there's something different about, so with Compass, we have what we call our private exclusives, and that is just simply, it's on the Compass portal. It's available for all Compass agents, as well as those buyers who are working with Compass agents to see. So they have access to it. There's now this newer version, which is called Compass Coming Soon, which now, back in the day with the private exclusives, you really weren't allowed to do much with it other than just place it in the portal, and you'd get every now and then, especially when inventory was really super tight a few years back, you'd have some agents that might reach out to you, or buyers that would reach out to you because they saw it out there. But, ultimately last year, we developed this new Compass Coming Soon, where it was only on the Compass portal, but now it was front facing to the consumer. So, if you looked up this property, did a Google search on 123 Main Street, it would show up on the Compass portal. It would not show up in other places. We also had the freedom, or have, I should say, have the freedom to place a sign on the property, to run social media ads on it, to post about it on social media, to send out an e-blast, not only just to Compass agents, but to all the agents out there, to let them know about this property that can only be found on compass.com. It sounds like those are the ones that they're really after. I mean, it's not so much the ones that you just place in the Compass portal and let it sit there. It's the actual, have it be consumer facing, where they can then find it online without having to be, a Compass agent or Compass client. And it's the marketing of the property off of the MLS that they seem to have the issue with. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it makes sense that they would care about that, right? Because now it's this private listing that Compass or any other brokerage, right, is listing, but is not listed on their site, right? So as that population of listings grows, at the end of the day, if I'm a prospective buyer or a lot of prospective buyers out there, and everyone kind of starts understanding, hey, I can go see more of the market here. Doesn't matter whether it's Compass or Redfin or Zillow or homes.com, you're going to go to where you have the most options. Yeah. I see this question, by the way, too.
Yeah. Homes for Cash MA asked, is that FSBOs also?
No, they actually clarified this. And this was one of my first questions, because the way the policy first read, I said, oh, well, I guess if you want to sell your home on your own, you can't do it anymore, because this policy kind of goes against that. But they have an additional kind of clause that says if you are selling your home on your own and publicly market it before or whatever, you can publish it on our site.
Okay, so I have another question here from Kristen. I probably need to interview some realtors. This actually is my daughter, but
I'm available, Kristen.
But would you recommend delayed marketing for a home that you plan to put on the market in a very desirable community a month or two in advance? And I'm going to take this one. Absolutely. But I mean, you also need to, because I think I know you're just asking for a friend. Absolutely. I would definitely say that makes a heck of a lot of sense. If you're not completely ready to go on the market, and many of the homes that I'm putting out there through our private exclusive network are properties that just aren't really ready to go on the market. But you know what? You kind of throw it out there and you figure, you know what? Hey, maybe there's a 30-foot great white swimming out there who sees this thing and just takes it, gives you that premium price and runs off with it. What the heck? I mean, to be able to get premium price without the risk of accumulating days on market, if you ever did have to go into the MLS, and then also, not, as I mentioned, not have to go through the rigmarole that most home sellers have to go through to sell their houses. I mean, there's a lot of freaking value there. I mean, my clients love it. So I think it's a great idea. But at the same time, too, I always say to these clients, if you're going to put it out there, you need to be prepared. If you get your offer, you need to be, you get your offer, and let's assuming that it's a qualified buyer, they are able to show you that they're, ready, willing, and able to purchase the property, then, it's an awesome tool to use. So I definitely recommend that. Craig, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you. So, when I'm going out and meeting with a seller or prospective seller, I like to kind of lay out all the different paths that we can take. And I talk about the delayed marketing, the private exclusives, the Compass coming soons. And then I also talk about, going to the MLS and then that listing reflecting to Zillow and all of these different sites. From a seller perspective, I mean, if you have a property, and I'll just throw out an example here, and you think your property is worth $700,000 to $750,000, and you and your agent have talked about this, and you would be ecstatic at $800,000. Private exclusive listing is a way that you can say, you know what, we're not really ready to go on the market yet, but we're just going to put it in a private status for $800,000, not have to show it to 1 million people, not have to spend as much money and time and energy. And if there's someone who's looking for our exact house in our exact neighborhood and wants to give us $800,000, fantastic, right? So from a seller's perspective, a lot of times it's a great avenue for them to test the market, not accrue days on market, and also not have any history of a price reduction. So they can test the market at these aspirational prices. And then, hey, if we didn't sell it for 800,000, now we kind of have to dial it back in when we go to the MLS.
100%. Exactly. So Christy Backley says, you two guys are so knowledgeable. What great agents. And, Christy, I appreciate that. And if you ever need a good agent, feel free to reach out to either Craig or I. We will definitely be happy to take you on board.
Thanks, Christy.
Christy actually works with us, so we're not going to be taking her on as a new client. But, anyways, Ashley asks the question, has the MLS taken a position?
No, not to my knowledge, unless I haven't seen a new publication in the last hour or so. I think that
which we're probably so outdated with what we're talking about right now because we haven't looked at anything in an hour.
Right, exactly. It's changing minute by minute. But to my knowledge, no, the MLS has not taken a stance on this, and I think they will, and it'll be different for different MLSs in different parts of the country. And the one thing that they're probably going to make a decision on is, okay, if you choose to go with this delayed marketing option as a seller, what is the time in which you then have to put it into the MLS? Is that what you're thinking, Kevin, too, or?
Yeah, I mean, and you and I were talking about this before we got on. I haven't heard anything about that. Now, one thing, I'm just going to back up a little bit for Ashley because I know she may not have heard the beginning, but MLS hasn't taken a stance. And by the way, there's many different MLS boards. Here in the Mid-Atlantic region, we're part of Bright MLS, which is a very large MLS company, but there's different MLS boards throughout the country. So each one of them may take different stances along the way. But really, the incredible thing is, I believe it was March 25th. It was actually National Association of Realtors came out, with this new ability to delay, being able to go on the market, because the old Clear Cooperation was CCP was very clear that your property needed to go on the market in the MLS within 1 day of doing any public marketing. So a simple Facebook post or something on Instagram, you were forced to then go into the MLS within 1 day. So it's actually the National Association of Realtors who's kind of cleared this path here. But that was, when I say that's new, it was March 25th. So, we're just shy of 3 weeks, or maybe 3 weeks right now. It's been Zillow and Redfin that have really hit back in the last, in the last few days now, stating about their new policy changes. But yeah, I'm waiting to hear from MLS. My sense is they're probably going to put something out there like 14 to 21 days, probably something in the neighborhood of what they did when they did the, adopted the coming soon policy and everything. That's my thought, but I haven't heard anything on that yet.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be different. And again, I think as realtors, we're very used to the MLS, making different statuses and making different changes. And it's very, easy for us to kind of, adopt changes and just kind of go with it as it changes. But I think, again, the biggest thing here is that this is not the National Association of Realtors. This is not the MLS. This is not the Department of Justice or some lawsuit. This is, a public home searching site that is basically drawing a line in the sand and saying, we want to change how the real estate industry works.
Yeah. Craig, we've got a few more minutes left, but I wanted to kind of pivot a little bit to talk a little bit about the local Montgomery County real estate market. And so you don't need to worry about these statistics, but I'm kind of interested to hear you chime in, because you're definitely a guy who's out there on the streets. There's no question about it. You're showing more homes than I am. So I think you have a really good feel for what you see around Montgomery County, especially. So I'm going to just throw out some numbers that just came out in March and kind of get your thoughts. So one of the huge things that we're seeing, and we hear all this stuff about, oh, you're going to have a market crash. I don't believe that's going to take place, but I would definitely say that we are currently under a market correction right now. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. And I mean, again, it can be location and neighborhood specific, and it kind of always is that way. But
Spotty.
for what it feels like there is more inventory available. It feels like the homes are not selling as fast. And it seems like there are more deals out there for prospective home buyers, and they're able to get homes maybe at a lower price, maybe under asking price,
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
contingencies.
So I'm going to tell you what the numbers look like. So listing inventory, home inventory as of April 1, up 63% from the same time last year. That's freaking huge. So still the inventory is low. So at the first day of April, and by the way, guys, we're only talking about properties that are in MLS. So we're not talking about, there's also an inventory that's off MLS, but still the greater majority is on MLS. But this is just MLS statistics. 1,296 listings on the market April 1st of 2025 compared to 792 at this time last year. So huge growth there. Units sold. These are the units that were sold during the month of March in 2025 was down 8.75%. So not a huge drop there, but a huge, increase in the inventory. So not a huge drop in the amount of sales, but there were 657 sales in March of 2025 compared to 720 sales during March of 2024. And the one thing I like getting geeked out about, I'm definitely a geek when it comes to this, is talking about the absorption rate. And the absorption rate is the relationship of the inventory of homes to the monthly amount of sales. And this time last year, we had just about 1 month supply of inventory. We had, as I just read, we had 792 listings on April 1st, and we had during the month of March 720 sales. So virtually, what that means is that, if you've got 790 homes on the market and 720 of them sold the prior month, the rate of sales would mean that, no new inventory comes on the market. Everything would be sold out within a little bit over 1 month. Today, we've got 2 months worth of inventory on the market. And so there's greater choice out there for buyers. There's more inventory for them to look at. And when that happens, buyers are going to be more picky. They're going to be more choosy. They're going to probably be able to negotiate more. Are you seeing that with the buyers you're working with?
100%. I mean, from a buyer perspective, I think right now, in comparison to the last several years, it seems like there's much more inventory. It seems like there is much more ability to land the home, land it for a good price, good terms, more selection in general. They're not going as fast. Everybody's not losing their minds, having to go out and write an offer in 5 minutes. There are still some areas like that, but it's interesting because it kind of goes back to our main topic tonight. It's like, if you're a seller, you probably want to use the delayed marketing to test things out and see where it lands. If the market is
100%.
Not this, hey, we put it on the market and in 2 days it sold for, hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking price. Well, if that's the case, then I guess you could just put everything on the MLS, right? But,
Yeah.
I have been out quite a bit, boots on the ground, and it feels very much like there is a lot more inventory, and it seems like buyers have a lot more selection and opportunity to get homes that they want. One thing that I'll say, and I'll let you take it, is that we had rates a little bit down a couple of weeks ago, and they've crept up a little bit. I think if we stay at a 6%-ish flat rate, or if rates even came down, I think it would be incredible for buyers.
Yeah. And the other thing that we're also starting to see is more of the protective contingencies coming back to contracts where, those have pretty much for the better part of 4.5, 5 years had gone by the wayside. So the majority of home sales I've had this year, there have been home inspection contingencies, there have been appraisal contingencies. So we're definitely, I agree with you. I still would say overall, it's a market that still does favor home sellers, but it's certainly balancing out right now.
Right. I agree.
A few other quick little things I'm just going to throw out there, kind of interesting tidbits. Craig, what would you say, is the percentage of home sales last month in Montgomery County that were cash purchases?
A lot, 30%.
You're close. It's 24%.
Okay.
It was about what it was all of last year. So, I mean, you're still seeing a lot of cash purchasers out there in the marketplace. I mean, more so I've seen in the last 3 or 5 years than I've seen in the first like 25 years of my career. And then a few other things just to kind of note, and we'll kind of wrap it up. I mean, you know, so just to go through some of the statistics. Hold on, I'm getting myself all twisted and turned here. So average days on the market in March was up 25% from the same time last year. Not a huge change. I mean, basically the average days on market in March of 2025 was 25 days versus 20 days in March of 2024. So not huge change. 25% sounds like a lot. And I guess it really kind of is, but it just goes more to show, you know, the fact that the buyers have more choices out there. What else? There was a few other points I wanted to mention here. So while overall, you know, homes are, you know, on average are on the market longer today than they were this time last year. I thought one other interesting thing, of the 720 sales, 61% of all the 720 sales sold within 10 days of being on the market.
Wow. I mean, that sounds about right. I mean, I still think that, like, again, I think you're right in that the market is sort of correcting itself, and it seems a little bit more of a fair fight for buyers than it has in, you know, the last several years. But you know, homes are still selling relatively quickly. It's not like we have this huge influx of inventory where it's a complete buyer's market, right? So I think you said 70% sold within the first 10 days.
61%.
61. Yeah. I mean, those are going to be your homes that are marketed really well, and that are presented very well, priced very well, sometimes in areas that are more sought after. And I think that, you know, just like with a prospective buyer interviewing buyer's agents, like, there's a difference in listing agents out there. And I would bet that 61% is probably some of your better agents in the area.
Right. Who's counseling the home sellers on what to do to get their homes prepared, you know,
Right.
counseling them on pricing it well from the beginning, especially today. Because the one thing that, you know, my conversation with my seller clients today is, guys, there's not a lot of fluff in this marketplace. I mean, fluff is kind of gone. You know, let's find out where the market value is. You know, let's take a look at some of the more recent comparable sales, and let's price close to that. Let's not price it. You know, used to be, you know, oftentimes especially if you knew you had an awesome property and you were putting it up at a great time of year, you know, you could potentially take that, you know, market value and add 5 to 10% to it and springboard it. Today, this is not the market to be doing that in, unless you want to pre-market it, right?
Right.
That's
Exactly.
what you do with pre-marketing, guys. That's
Exactly.
what it's all about.
Yeah, it keeps coming back to that. And I think you're exactly right. I think you're exactly right. That's 61%. I mean, they're, you know, listings that are priced well, that are marketed well, but more importantly, priced well, tend to sell quickly, tend to get better offers, not just in price, but also in terms that are more attractive to the seller. And I think that if you're a seller and you're shooting for a number on the MLS that is a little bit out of reach, you know, you might run into having it sit for a little bit.
Or you better have a great freaking kitchen.
Yeah, great kitchen, great bathroom. Yeah, exactly.
You want this price, you better put $100,000 into
exactly.
You know, now let me ask you a few other questions. I mean, are you seeing values dropping right now in the DMV and, you know, Montgomery County more specifically?
It doesn't feel like they're really dropping per se. It just doesn't feel like they're continuing to rise. It's kind of just staying a little bit flat and stagnant right now, if I just had to give like a general, you know, thought. But yeah, for a while, for the last few years, especially during, you know, the pandemic, it seemed like properties were increasing by 10% every 6 months, right? So I think at some point in time, we had to correct that. And at some point in time, it gets unaffordable for most people to purchase homes. I think I saw a stat recently that, average first time home buyer age is like in their early to mid 40s now, which is,
Right.
Indicative of how expensive homes are sometimes now.
You just had a birthday recently, didn't you?
Tomorrow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Happy
Yeah.
birthday, Craig. And
Thank you.
how old are you going to be?
40.
Dude, 40. That's a big one, man. I was
I
about to
know.
say you look great for 50.
I know. I decided to spend my birthday doing a live stream with you talking about Zillow, Redfin, and Compass.
Well, actually, I'm going to just lastly give out the last statistic that I see is, also, end of March was also the end of the first quarter. And so one of the things that I was looking up is average sales price was actually up in Montgomery County 5.2% for the first quarter of 2025 in comparison to the first quarter of 2024. So sounds about right to me, sounds about right. I don't think you're getting the, I think that I don't see this huge breeze behind us that's going to start taking these values super, super high this spring, like we've experienced in other springs. I think that once again, you got a great property. It's marketed properly, staged well, and everything priced appropriately. That one still might be one, especially some of the hotter areas might be one for multiple offers coming in and potentially jacking up the sales price. But by and large, that's kind of more the exception than the rule. The other thing that's interesting is that, when you break down into the numbers, the average sales price of a single family home first quarter of 2025 comparing to first quarter of 2024 was up 6%. Attached homes, which basically is townhomes and condos, were up about 1%. So there definitely seems to be a premium for single family homes, more so. I do think, though, when you look at those attached numbers, you've got condos kind of weighing down the townhouse a little bit there, yeah, I mean, even though we're starting to see a market slowdown, a market correction and everything, still the best homes out there, 60% of them sold within 10 days. So those are going to be the best properties. And once again, if you're a buyer out there, you need to be, not necessarily just checking things out on Zillow and Redfin, because as we know now, you probably won't be seeing everything as of May. But beyond that, you need to have a really good agent, because when these great properties, show up, they don't last long. And these are some of the ones where there will be competition. So you need to develop your team early. Who's my real estate agent? Who's my mortgage lender? My home inspector, my title. We need to get all that stuff together. Have your team developed really before you get out there. Once again, guys, it's a lot like hunting a grizzly bear. So not that I've ever done that before. But anyways, Craig, do you have anything more to add? I mean, I really appreciate your time here this evening. I thought your birthday was last weekend, but I guess I saw you celebrating it on social media.
Yeah, we had an early little surprise get together, which I'm still recovering from a little bit. So, but no, yeah, I mean, I think that we're, look, this news has really just kind of come to us over the last few days, and there's going to be some little nuances that we figure out along the way, but it's big news, and it's big news from who it's coming from. I think is the biggest takeaway for me, that it's not coming from the National Association of Realtors. It's coming from Zillow drawing
or
that
the
line.
DOJ.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. No, I agree. So Craig, for anybody that's out there watching you or watching this, if they need to get in touch with you, if they're thinking about buying or selling and they want to work with a guy who's like 18 years younger than me, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, you can reach out on any social media platform. You can email me, craig.sword@compass.com. You'll find all my contact information there. Any online outlet you want to check out.
Okay, great. Well, hey, man, I thank you so much for joining in. I think you gave a really unique perspective, one that I don't really have because I haven't done a ton of work with Zillow. You have. But once again, it's going to be a roller coaster. And I do have a question. Will you come back and do this again sometime? Because as you said, there's going to be changes. There's going to be nuances and things like that.
Count me in anytime, Kevin. 100%.
Awesome. Well, hey, Craig, thanks so much. And I just wanted to also thank everybody out there for watching. Thank you for your questions. As always, if there's anything you guys need when it comes to real estate and you'd rather work with a more mature guy than Craig, work with me. Obviously, you know how to get me here. There's a few different ways. You can go ahead and you can always text me at 240-793-7495. Also, if you just want to book a time to meet with me, you can go ahead and scan the Calendly link that you see below there. Scan that link. You can go ahead and set up a one-on-one. We can talk about anything that you want to discuss when it comes to real estate via video conference. And then also, if you are somebody who's watching this from outside of the area, or maybe you know somebody outside of the area who needs, good real estate advice, real estate help in their area outside of the DMV, and you want a good referral to a quality agent. And I say a quality agent because Craig said something earlier today. He said that basically 10% of the agents are really good. I always say 10% of the agents do about 90% of the business out there. So it's really important wherever you are, if you're thinking about buying or selling a home and you need to work with an agent, that you want to make sure they're one of the top agents. Well, you know what? If you go ahead and scan that referral link, I network with a lot of the top professionals throughout the country. So the chances are I can find somebody really great for your area to help you. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining. We had a lot of questions tonight. And I really appreciate you guys joining in. And I will, also, don't forget to check out my YouTube channel. If you're watching this on delay, go ahead and share it with your friends. Subscribe to my channel. I think I've said it all. Thank you guys very much. And I will see you.